Sheriff Manson, the manager of Coatbridge Cinema. It's the 3rd of March, 1918, almost 4 years into the First World War. Films like this one were used by many cinema managers to attract local people to the show, to see themselves on the screen. Cinema was an important popular pastime during the war years. At a time when it needed to address a mass audience, the state began to explore ways to mobilize cinema's potential. Meanwhile, the film trade realized that the war presented fresh opportunities to sell tickets and ingratiate itself with power. This cooperation between cinema and the military was often based on local connections. Here, Frank seems to be pitching to the officers the advantages of having the regimental march filmed.
We are now going to show the world what we are made of. We may have a tough fight, but you know as well as I do that we shall come out on top.
In this shot, the Lanarkshire volunteers march in the background, while Coatbridge punters mill around, looking straight at the camera, performing for it. They've been told by the local paper that the parade will be filmed, and that the film will be shown in Frank's cinema.
Play there for the early doors. Early doors, 9
We see the same process at work here. It is the 19th of July, 1914, 2 weeks before the outbreak of war. The camera pans left across the crowd assembled on Campbelltown Harbour to watch the Argyll and Sutherland Highlander Territorials arrive for their annual training. The showman in charge, cinema manager and self-styled magician, Professor Fred Rendell Burnett, manoeuvres the crowd to clear the view for the camera, so that the cinema audience will not only see themselves but also appreciate the spectacle of rifle-toting, kilt-wearing, enthusiastic young men. Cinema managers were well aware of the appeal of parade films. They had been around since the beginnings of cinema. Here are the Gordon Highlanders marching through Aberdeen, off to fight in the Boer War in 1899.
For me, if you're no a God and you're no use to me. The Black Watcher braw, the Seaposts are no, but the cocky wee Gordon's the pride of them all.
Look at the size of those sporrans. The tartan kilt has long been used by the British military for recruitment purposes. Cinema was also useful in representing military life as fun and games. Cinema loved crowds, and crowds loved spectacle. Aberdeen, 1918. People have assembled to catch a glimpse of the new, awe-inspiring modern technology of warfare. Paul Virilio argues that the First World War produced a flow of images which functioned as the equivalent of an ammunition supply. This overwhelming frontal shot of a tank was not only designed to conjure up the terrifying might of industrial killing machines, but also to encourage viewers to help finance their production. It appears to have been successful. Here, a group of young women workers wave at the camera with their newly purchased war bonds. This popular enthusiasm was marshalled and displayed on occasions like this: King George's visit to Clydeside in 1917. Glasgow and the cluster of industrial towns surrounding the River Clyde were a powerhouse of British manufacturing and central to the war effort. A quarter of the world's shipping capacity was built on the Clyde. However, during the war years, Clydeside became the focus for emerging dissent and resistance, from anti-war demonstrations to women-led rent strikes and ongoing rank-and-file industrial action. Yet, if we look at the cinematic record of the time, there's no trace of it. As King George inspects a row of factory workers, some presumably veterans, the film clearly intends to present wholehearted support for the war effort. Here the boss shows George his factory and workforce. Yet what do we make of the man standing directly in front of the king, his arms folded firmly across his chest? And what about this man with the sunken eyes? Does his scowl signify dissent? Or does he just want his tea? Feeding the troops was a crucial challenge, which required state coordination and public cooperation. This film, Patriotic Porkers, was made by the Scottish company Green's Film Service for the Ministry of Food. The film was structured to show the logical sequence of events connecting the front door to the front line. Longer in duration, Patriotic Porkers uses staged action and continuity editing to convey the steps of a process: collecting the waste, carting it away, feeding the pigs, and providing rations for the troops. Its systematic construction makes it different from the local topical scenes we've seen before. But like those local films, it is not averse to a bit of cuteness and comedy. Greens had made their name in the fairground trade. They knew their audience. Hence, this ostensibly patriotic film ends with an appeal to the punter's pocket. This pragmatic approach shaped the relationship between cinema and the state at the time. As imperial powers waged war over control of markets, the cinema industry was engaged in its own process of market expansion and legitimation. Practical cooperation suited them both. But these films tell a nuanced story. Not solely propaganda, the practices of local filmmaking produced ambiguous images. We're back in Coatbridge, in 1918. This is the parade that Frank shot. The men, carrying their rifles, march in formation as if to war. Then, slowly, the order of things begins to break down. Regimented military life makes way for the chaos of the everyday. Despite the weight of the Great War narrative, images like this emerge. And for a moment, it is possible to imagine another cinema, another century, a different world.